Yeah. And so that is how I learned it's not a good idea to sleep with a parrot in your room. We moved his cage out into the living room the next day. Hmm? Oh, no, he passed. He was fabulous. He lived about 80 years. I suppose it's natural I would like a long-lived pet, huh? But he was beautiful, and he was sweet, and he was cuddly, and even if he wasn't as long-lived as he was, I would have loved him just as much. Oh my god. Are we turning off here? Are we going to the botanical gardens? Oh, I love this place. Oh, how did you know? Did you know? Of course. Dave. Well, good call. Well done. I've always liked it here. I mean, it's evolved over the years, haven't we all? But at its core, it's the same. Come on, let me show you. Okay, so look over here. This rose garden looks very, very classic, doesn't it? You could picture it being colonial era or Victorian, just endless, never changing. Yeah, no, that's the past, 30 years? Past 30 years. No, the outline of the garden here was still here, but it was a fruit garden. Yeah. Actually, most everything here was fruit-bearing or an herb garden over by the side, but can you see where the kitchen is in the mansion? Yeah. Oh, it was beautiful. It was stunning, but also very functional and sustaining. I liked it. These trees have been here since the 1850s, I think. And that one has been here since before I was. So very old is what I'm saying. Does that make it weird for you? I mean, I suppose the whole thing would be weird for you, huh? Really? Okay. Good. So, when you asked Dave what places I like to visit, did he mention why this place was special to me? Ah. Come over here. This is where I was turned. Right up against this tree. Oh, that made it sound tawdry. I mean, okay, yes. I did start off with my back against the tree and his mouth on my neck. This is not making it sound any better, but okay. The person who did it, my sire, was actually Dave's ex-boyfriend. And that's how we met each other. Did I know? By that time I knew. Or at least I had an inkling. It's a little weird. We didn't have words for it at that point. We had ideas for it. I knew that he preferred the company of men. And back at that time, you knew that some people did some things, but you kind of saw it through the lens of it being an act, as opposed to who or what they were, if that makes sense. So, like, I had an idea that he had romantic encounters with men, but I didn't think of it as him being gay, per se. Like, obviously, we didn't have that word. But I didn't think of him as being even homosexual, because we didn't have that word yet either. It was just something that he did that was considered sinful, but, I mean, we all sinned. So, but either way, you know what, suffice it to say, I didn't think that he was interested in me as a romantic partner, and I wasn't interested in him as a romantic partner. Keep in mind, the main headline for me was not that he liked to kiss men. It was that he was a vampire. That he was going to live forever, so long as nobody changed that for him forcibly. And at that point, I wanted that. Why? I wish I had an answer for you that was noble or philosophical, or at least an interesting story that ended in a life or death situation, but I was just afraid. I told you about my mother being sick when I was a kid and dying while I was young, and I just spent my childhood being morbidly preoccupied and very afraid of dying. And dying young. I mean, we hear a lot about like what the average lifespan was for people, and when you hear like people on average died in their 40s or 30s, or for one, that's Middle Ages, I think. But more to the point, if you got past your first few years, you were likely to live a good long life. You could live into your 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. So it wasn't entirely reasonable for me to be so afraid of dying young, but it was understandable because my mother's death was very imminent for a good few years. That kind of thing is going to affect a kid, and for me, the way it manifested was that I was morbidly kind of obsessed with death and very afraid. It didn't go away very quickly. By the time I was in my early 20s, and I met this man who I discovered had found a way to never die of disease, never linger, never fade, never weaken, never go through all the things that I'd seen my mother go through. I wanted that. I just wanted it. It took a few years before he would agree to it. He wanted me to think about it for a good long time, and he was right. He was very right. Like I said, it could be a blessing or it could be a curse, and he made sure that I understood, and he tried to make sure that I understood the possibilities as best he could. He made sure that I met other older vampires who had eventually slipped into madness. He let me see the people who had become so jaded and misanthropic that life no longer seemed like a joy for them. He made me move with him once, just to experience what it's like to pick up and relocate and leave all of your friends and acquaintances behind, because we had to live in hiding. And we could only stay in one place for so long before people would notice that we didn't age. I lived with him for 2 years, with people assuming that I was his wife, so that I could experience up close and personal what his life was like, living at night, because at the time we had no real sunblock except for our clothes, and certainly no limousine tint. I watched him feed. I watched him never eat. I watched him constantly look over his back, try to suss out if someone had clued into what he was. I watched him live in fear of discovery. And I still wanted it. I still wanted it above wasting away in sickness. And so, one night he took me out here. This house here in the center of the garden is where I lived with him for 2 years. And when he felt I was ready, he took me out here by this tree. There was going to be a lot of blood, you see. He had to drain me. And he couldn't drink it all. Nobody could have drank all of it, but it was easier outside to wash down the blood and let it just drain into the grass and fertilize the tree. This tree. I suppose this is where I died. That sounds like such a dreadful, awful, melancholic thing, but it's also where I was born. So, I don't remember much. I remember fading. I remember everything going dark. I remember him holding me. I remember my back sliding down against the tree. And then I remember waking up under the tree. You would think it would be either dreadful or romantic or something. But no, it wasn't beautiful, but it was. I'm not making sense. It was a cloud-filled, moonless night. He chose that night because the rain was coming. People wouldn't be out as much, and it would wash away any of the blood that he missed with the bucket. But everything was so vibrant. The way the clouds were lined with moonlight, the way small animals that lived by night just rustled in the grass and the trees, the way everything smelled, the way I could hear the heartbeat of the nearest servant. It was all so mundane and so beautiful at the same time. And I knew that I was free of ever having to be afraid again. And living without fear. For myself, at least. I mean, obviously, then I had kids, and I feared for them like I never knew I could fear. And there was nothing I could do about that. That was hard. But never being afraid for myself ever again was just such a liberating thing. I've never regretted it, not for a moment. So what do you think? Do you think I made the right choice? Had you imagined that it was something forced upon me, or that it was something I would only do under duress? I mean, in a way, it was under some kind of duress, but nobody pressured me. Nobody forced me. I wasn't about to die if I didn't take his life-saving blood. I just wanted it. Didn't you ever think about it? Like, what it might be like if you could live forever? Yeah? What did you decide? That was not a trick question. I was not offering. Just curious about your thoughts. Yeah, that's fair. Well, I can't say there's nothing I regret. I've regretted living longer than people that I would have liked to have had more time with, but I've never regretted continuing to live. So, yeah, this is a very special place for me. It changed my life from fear to freedom. Oh, my sire. Yeah, no, he's still around somewhere. I haven't spoken to him for a couple of years, but I'll run into him again. I know I will. We always do. It's a big world, but it gets a little smaller in certain communities. He kept this house and came back to it at least once after he and I parted ways. He came back as his own son. But he had no particular attachment to it. It wasn't exactly his ancestral home. It was just someplace he lived for a while. But to me, it was the beginning of looking forward to a life untainted by fear. For me, it was everything. So, you know, if you'd like, we can take a tour of the house. You can see inside. The furniture is not what we had, but they've restored it really nicely. I mean, the furniture is different, but it's from the era, and wallpaper and the paint and the fixtures are all, well, just like he had it when he first built it, when I was living there. Yeah, come on. I'll show you my old room. Oh, check out the fish pond.